What if I told you that calling yourself an empath might actually be preventing you from seeing what's really going on inside your mind? Stay with me, because what Carl Jung discovered about identity and the psyche will completely shatter the story you've been telling yourself. And trust me, by the end of this, you'll understand why. Carl Jung said that the greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of its parents. But here's what most people miss about that insight. It doesn't stop with your parents. That burden gets woven into something far more dangerous: your identity. And the empath label, as comforting as it feels, might be the most sophisticated hiding place your psyche has ever constructed. Here's what nobody is telling you about the empath identity, and why Jung's research makes it absolutely undeniable. According to Carl Jung, every identity we adopt serves a dual purpose. It reveals something about us, yes, but more importantly, it conceals something we're not ready to face. Jung called this the persona, the mask we present to the world, and here's where it gets unsettling. What if the empath identity itself has become your mask? Not a mask of coldness or indifference, but something far more deceptive. A mask made of compassion, a mask that looks so virtuous, so noble, that no one, not even you, would ever think to look behind it. But Jung would. And what he'd find there will change everything you think you know about yourself. Carl Jung discovered a pattern he called identification with the archetype. It happens when someone merges so completely with a psychological role that they lose access to the parts of themselves that don't fit that role. The healer who can never admit they need healing. The giver who has forgotten how to receive. The one who feels everything for others but has gone completely numb to their own needs. Sound familiar? This isn't empathy. Jung would call this psychic inflation, and it's far more common than anyone wants to admit. Here's where the psychology gets absolutely fascinating. And if you've ever wondered why being an empath feels both like a gift and a prison, this is your answer. According to Jung's theory of complexes, certain emotional patterns take on a life of their own inside the psyche. They become autonomous. They run in the background like invisible programs, shaping your reactions before your conscious mind even registers what's happening. For people who identify as empaths, Jung would identify a specific complex operating beneath the surface. It's not an empathy complex. It's a worthiness complex. And the difference between the two will send chills down your spine. The worthiness complex works like this. At some point, usually in childhood, you learned that your value was directly tied to your ability to feel, to anticipate, to absorb other people's emotional states. You became the translator of tension in the room, the one who could sense a storm before it arrived, the one who made everyone else feel understood. And it worked. You were praised for it. You were needed for it. Your emotional labor became your currency. But here's what Jung understood that most people completely miss. That wasn't empathy. That was survival. And there is a monumental difference between the two. Carl Jung called it the wounded healer archetype, and it reveals something most empaths are terrified to confront. The reason you feel so deeply for others isn't necessarily because you were born with a gift. It might be because feeling for others became the only safe way to feel at all. Your sensitivity didn't develop in a vacuum. It was forged in an environment where reading the room wasn't a talent. It was a necessity, where anticipating someone else's mood wasn't compassion. It was self-protection. Jung discovered that what looks like extraordinary empathy is often extraordinary hypervigilance, wearing a beautiful disguise. And once you see this pattern, you cannot unsee it. But don't misunderstand what I'm saying here, because this is where Jung's insight becomes genuinely liberating rather than deflating. According to Carl Jung, recognizing the origin of a pattern doesn't diminish its power, it transforms it. There's a massive difference between empathy that flows from an unhealed wound and empathy that flows from conscious awareness. The first one drains you. It leaves you exhausted, resentful, unable to set boundaries, constantly abandoning yourself for people who never asked you to. The second one, what Jung called differentiated feeling, is something entirely different. It's empathy with roots, empathy with a backbone, empathy that serves others without destroying you in the process. Here's what will absolutely blow your mind about what Jung discovered next. Carl Jung observed that the moment someone stops identifying with an archetype and starts relating to it consciously, everything changes. You don't lose your sensitivity. You stop being enslaved by it. You don't stop caring. You start choosing where your care goes instead of hemorrhaging it in every direction. This is what Jung called the withdrawal of projections, and it's the most important psychological shift an empath will ever experience. Because here's the hidden pattern beneath the empath identity that almost no one talks about. Every time you absorb someone else's pain, you avoid your own. Every time you focus on healing another person, you postpone your own healing. Every time you say, "I just feel too much," you give yourself permission to never ask the harder question. What am I not feeling? What have I buried so deep beneath all this empathy that I've forgotten it exists? Jung called this the shadow of the healer, and it contains everything you've been running from: your anger, your needs, your grief, your right to take up space without earning it through emotional labor. According to Carl Jung, the shadow doesn't disappear when you ignore it. It grows. It leaks out in ways you don't recognize. The resentment you can't explain, the exhaustion that never lifts, the relationships where you give everything and feel hollow in return. These aren't signs that you're too empathic for this world. They're signals from your shadow, telling you that something beneath the empath identity is desperate to be seen. And here's the part that changes everything permanently. Jung said that individuation, the process of becoming truly whole, requires you to disidentify from every role you've used to define yourself, even the beautiful ones, especially the beautiful ones, because the roles that feel most sacred are often the ones hiding the deepest wounds. The empath identity isn't wrong, but it's incomplete. It's one chapter of your story being read as the entire book, and as long as you cling to it, you'll never discover what Jung called the self with a capital S, the totality of who you are beyond any single label. The deeper pattern hiding beneath the empath identity is this: you are not just someone who feels. You are someone who learned to feel for others because, at some point, feeling for yourself wasn't safe. And the moment you bring that pattern into conscious awareness, something remarkable happens. Your empathy doesn't die. It's reborn, not as a survival mechanism, but as a genuine choice. Not as a wound disguised as a gift, but as a gift that has finally been separated from the wound. Carl Jung called this the opus, the great work of the psyche, transforming what was unconscious into what is conscious, turning what controlled you into what you consciously wield. The awakened empath isn't someone who feels more. It's someone who finally understands why they feel, and from that understanding, gains the freedom to feel authentically for the first time. And that, according to everything Jung spent his lifetime uncovering, is not just healing, it's the beginning of who you were always meant to become. Thank you so much for staying with me through this exploration. If this shifted something in the way you see yourself, subscribe to the channel and share this with someone who needs to hear it.